Rain lashed against my face, stinging my skin like 1,000 tiny needles. My boots slipped in the mud, and I grabbed a wet branch to steady myself, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I screamed her name again, but the wind just swallowed my voice. Sarah, Sarah, baby, please answer me. Nothing, just the roar of the storm and the terrifying silence of the woods. I wiped the water from my eyes, squinting into the darkness. My flashlight beam cut through the rain, dancing over wet leaves and twisted roots. I was terrified. Every parent's worst nightmare was happening to me right here, right now. I had that sick feeling in my gut, the kind that tells you something is wrong, really wrong. And then I saw it. A patch of light blue fabric. It was caught on a thorn bush, half buried in the mud. My stomach dropped. That was her sweater, the one I bought her for her birthday last month. Sarah, I screamed, scrambling down the ravine, sliding uncontrollably through the dirt. I hit the bottom hard, my knees smashing into the rocks, but I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the panic. I swung the light around frantically, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. And then I froze. There she was, curled up in a ball at the base of a massive oak tree, shivering so violently her teeth were chattering loud enough for me to hear over the rain. She looked so small, so broken. Oh my God, Sarah, I rushed to her, falling to my knees in the mud. I pulled her into my arms, expecting her to hug me back, but she was limp. Her skin was ice cold, her lips were blue. She opened her eyes, but they were glassy, unfocused. She looked through me, not at me. Daddy, she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. I've got you, honey, I've got you, I sobbed, ripping off my heavy waterproof jacket and wrapping it around her shaking body. You're safe now, Daddy, here. She gripped my arm. Her fingers were weak, trembling, but she held on like her life depended on it. She pulled me closer, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. She did it, Sarah whispered. I leaned in, trying to hear her over the thunder. Who did this to you? Sarah closed her eyes, a single tear mixing with the rain on her cheek. Martha, my mother-in-law, she drove me out here, she left me. I felt a cold rage spread through my chest, hotter than the adrenaline. Martha left you here, in this storm. Sarah nodded weakly. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold, the words that changed everything. She said my blood was dirty, Dad. She said I deserved this. The world stopped. For a second I couldn't hear the rain. I couldn't feel the cold. All I could feel was a white-hot fury exploding in my brain. Dirty blood. That was the phrase, that was the trigger. I looked down at my daughter, battered and freezing in the mud, discarded like trash by a woman who thought she was better than us. I didn't say a word. I just scooped Sarah up into my arms, her head resting against my chest, and started the climb back up to the truck. My legs burned, but I felt strong, stronger than I had in years. I got her into the passenger seat, cranked the heater to the max, and wrapped a dry blanket from the back around her. Once I knew she was warming up, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. I opened my contacts and found the name I hadn't texted in a serious way for a long time. Brother Ben. I typed a message, short, clear. They hurt Sarah. Martha left her in the woods, said her blood was dirty. It's our turn, time for what Grandpa taught us. I hit send. I stared at the screen for a second. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then a reply. I'm already in the truck. Get the safe key, we're done hiding. I put the phone down and looked at my daughter. She was asleep now, exhausted. I put the truck in gear. Don't worry, baby, I whispered to the dark road ahead. They think we're nobody, they think we're dirt. They're about to find out exactly who we really are. But to understand why this moment was so explosive, you have to understand how we got here. You have to understand the lies we told to keep the peace, and the truth we hid to keep ourselves safe. It started 3 years ago. My life was simple back then, or at least I made sure it looked that way. I lived in a small, weathered house on the edge of town. I drove a 10-year-old pickup truck that rattled when it went over 50. I wore flannel shirts and work boots, and most people in town knew me as David, the guy who did odd carpentry jobs and fixed fences. That's how I raised Sarah, to be humble, to be kind, to never judge a book by its cover. When Sarah met Mark, I was happy for her, at first. Mark was a decent guy. He was handsome, polite, and he looked at Sarah like she was the only girl in the world. He worked in finance in the city, drove a shiny German car, and wore suits that cost more than my truck. But he seemed to love her. That's all a father wants, right? The first time Sarah brought him home, I was fixing the porch railing. Mark stepped out of his car, looking a little out of place in his polished loafers on my gravel driveway. "Dad, this is Mark," Sarah beamed, holding his hand. I wiped my hands on a rag and shook his hand. Firm grip, good eye contact. "Nice to meet you, sir," Mark said. "Sarah has told me so much about you." "Good things, I hope," I joked. He laughed, "Only the best." We had a barbecue in the backyard. It was nice, simple, but there were little signs even then. Mark made a few comments about the rustic charm of my place. He asked if I ever thought about upgrading the siding. Small things, ignorable things. But then came the day I met his parents. Martha and Richard. They lived in a gated community on the other side of the county. The kind of place where the grass is cut with scissors and the security guard checks your ID twice. When I pulled my truck up to their massive iron gates, the guard actually came out of his booth and walked around my vehicle, checking for, I don't know, stolen goods. "Name?" he asked, looking at my rusty bumper with disdain. "David Miller," I said, "here for dinner with the Vanderbilts." He checked his clipboard, frowned and buzzed me in. I drove up the long, winding driveway. The house was a mansion. Pillars, fountains, statues of lions, the works. It screamed money, but not just money. It screamed, "Look at how much money I have." I parked my truck next to a row of luxury SUVs. It looked like a sore thumb. Sarah met me at the door. She looked nervous. "Dad, please," she whispered, straightening my collar. "Just try to ignore Mom, she can be a lot." "I can handle a lot," I promised her. I walked in. The foyer was bigger than my living room. Martha came clicking down the marble stairs in heels that sounded like gunshots. She was dripping in jewelry. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection. "So," she said, stopping 3 steps from the bottom. She looked me up and down. "You must be the father." "Not David asterisk, not Sarah's dad asterisk, just the father." "David," I said, extending a hand. She didn't take it. She just gestured vaguely toward the dining room. "We're just about to sit down. Try not to track mud on the rug, would you? It's Persian, imported." I looked at my boots. They were clean. I had scrubbed them for 20 minutes before coming here. I swallowed my pride. For Sarah, dinner was a disaster. Richard, Mark's dad, sat at the head of the table and barely spoke. He just ate his steak and drank his wine. But Martha, she was on a mission. "So David," she said, swirling her wine glass, "Sarah tells us you're a handyman." "I do carpentry," I said. "Build furniture, fix houses, things like that." "How quaint," she smirked. "Labor. I've always said it must be so satisfying to work with your hands, you know, for people who aren't suited for intellectual pursuits." I froze, my fork hovered halfway to my mouth. Across the table, Sarah dropped her head. Mark looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "It's honest work," I said quietly. "Oh, I'm sure it is," Martha laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "And it explains so much about Sarah. She's very earthy, very simple. Mark is used to a certain caliber of woman, but he says Sarah grounds him, like a pet project." "Mom," Mark said, finally speaking up, "don't say that." "What?" Martha blinked, feigning innocence. "I'm complimenting her. Not everyone can be elite, darling. The world needs people to scrub the floors too." My knuckles turned white, gripping my fork. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to tell her exactly who I was. I wanted to tell her about the trust fund that had been growing interest since 1920. I wanted to tell her that my handyman business was a hobby I did because I was retired at 40. I wanted to tell her that my brother Ben was currently closing a deal to buy the bank that held the mortgage on her precious mansion. But I didn't. Because Grandpa had taught us better. "True power doesn't need to shout, David," he used to say. "It whispers, and when it strikes unseen." So I took a breath. I looked at Sarah, who was blinking back tears, and I smiled. "The world takes all kinds, Martha," I said. She smirked, thinking she had won, thinking she had put the poor, dirty carpenter in his place. "Indeed," she said. "Now let's discuss the wedding. Obviously we'll be paying for everything. We can't have guests thinking Mark married into destitution." That was the tone of the next 2 years. The wedding was extravagant, over the top, and completely controlled by Martha. She invited 300 of her friends and allowed us to invite 20. She picked the dress. She picked the venue. She even tried to make me wear a tuxedo with tails, but I refused. "I'll wear a suit," I told her. "Fine," she sniffed. "Just try to look presentable, we have senators coming." I walked Sarah down the aisle. She looked beautiful, but she looked tired. The spark in her eyes was dimming. As I handed her off to Mark, I leaned in. "You don't have to do this, honey. We can leave right now." She squeezed my hand. "I love him, Dad, it's just his mom. We'll get our own place, it'll be okay." But it wasn't okay. After the wedding, things got worse. Mark didn't stand up for her. He was a mama's boy through and through. They moved into a starter home that Martha bought for them, which meant Martha had a key, and she used it. She would come over unannounced, criticize Sarah's cleaning, criticize her cooking, criticize her clothes. Sarah started calling me less. When she did call, she sounded exhausted. "She was there again today, Dad," Sarah would whisper into the phone. "She threw away the curtains you made me. She said they looked cheap and trashy." "I'll come over there," I'd say, grabbing my keys. "No, no, please," Sarah would beg. "It just makes it worse. She tells Mark I'm being ungrateful and then Mark gets mad at me. Just let it go." So I let it go. I watched my vibrant, happy daughter fade away. She lost weight. She stopped laughing. She looked like a ghost of herself. Then came the pregnancy. We thought this would fix things. A baby brings people together, right? Wrong. When Sarah announced she was pregnant, Martha didn't cry tears of joy. She didn't hug her. She stared at Sarah's stomach with a look of pure disgust. "Are you sure?" Martha had asked. "Yes," Sarah smiled nervously. "We're so excited." "Well," Martha said, lighting a cigarette inside Sarah's house, "let's hope the genes fall on the right side of the tree. We can't have a Vanderbilt's heir looking common." That was 2 months ago. Since then the tension had been building like a pressure cooker. Sarah was 7 months pregnant now. She was huge, uncomfortable and emotional, and Martha was relentless. Yesterday I got a text from Sarah. "I can't take it anymore, Dad. She's trying to make me sign papers. Something about custody if anything happens to Mark, I'm scared." I called her immediately, but it went to voicemail. I drove to their house. Mark's car was there, but the lights were off. I pounded on the door, no answer. I called Mark, no answer. I called the police. They gave me the standard line. "She's an adult, sir. Unless there's evidence of a crime, we can't break down the door. Maybe she just went for a walk." "She's 7 months pregnant," I yelled. "She didn't go for a walk in the middle of the night." But they wouldn't listen. I spent the whole night in my truck, parked down the street, watching the house. Nothing. This morning the storm rolled in, a massive system that turned the sky black and flooded the roads. Around noon my phone pinged, a location pin. From Sarah. But no text, just the pin. I looked at the map. It wasn't her house, it wasn't the hospital. It was the old logging road out past the county line, deep woods, middle of nowhere. Why would she be there? My heart hammered against my ribs. I floored it. My old truck roared as I pushed it to 80 miles an hour on the slick roads. It took me 40 minutes to get there. The road ended at a rusty gate. I smashed through it with my bumper. I didn't care. I drove until the mud was too deep, then I got out and ran. And that brings us back to the moment I found her. The moment she told me what Martha said. She said my blood was dirty. Back in the truck, Sarah was warming up. The color was coming back to her cheeks. She was drinking water from my thermos. "Tell me exactly what happened, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, though I was raging inside. She took a shaky breath. Mark had a business trip. He left yesterday morning. As soon as he was gone, Martha came over. I gripped the steering wheel. "Go on." She brought a lawyer, or a guy she said was a lawyer. They had papers. They said I had to sign away my rights to the baby. "What?" I shouted. She said the Vanderbilt family trust has a clause that heirs must be of pure stock. She said since we're poor, my baby isn't good enough to inherit unless she adopts it. She wanted me to sign over my parental rights to her. She said she would raise the baby as her own, and I could be the nanny. I felt sick, physically sick. I refused, Sarah sobbed. I told her to get out, I screamed at her, I told her she was crazy. Good girl, I said. But then she snapped. She grabbed me. She's stronger than she looks, Dad. And that man, he helped her. They dragged me to her car. She said if I wouldn't listen to reason, I needed a timeout to think about my position in the world. She kidnapped you. She drove me out here, Sarah whispered. She stopped the car and told me to get out. She said, walk home, you trash. Maybe the cold will clean that dirty blood of yours. If you make it back, you'll sign the papers. If you don't, well, problem solved. She left you to die, I said, the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. She tried to kill you and my grandchild. Sarah nodded, burying her face in the blanket. I walked for hours, Dad. I got lost. I fell. I hurt my leg. I thought it was over. I managed to send the pin right before my battery died. I reached over and stroked her hair. It's over now, you're safe. I looked down at my phone. Ben had texted again. I'm at the farmhouse, the guys are here. We're opening the vault, meet us there. I smiled, a cold, hard smile. Martha thought she was dealing with a handyman and his helpless daughter. She thought money was the only power in the world. She thought she could throw us away like garbage. She had no idea that the dirty blood she hated so much ran through the veins of the most dangerous family in the state. We weren't just carpenters, we weren't just poor country folk. Grandpa didn't just teach us how to build fences, he taught us how to own the land the fences stood on, and he taught us that when someone attacks your family, you don't just fight back. You end them. I put the truck in drive. Where are we going, Dad? Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. The police station. No, I said softly. The police will just file a report. Martha has judges in her pocket, we know that. Then where? We're going to see Uncle Ben, I said. Sarah looked confused. Uncle Ben, the mechanic. I let out a short, dry laugh. Yeah, the mechanic. She didn't know, I had never told her. It was time she knew the truth about who we were. Sarah, I said, looking her in the eye, there's something I never told you about Grandpa, about the business. What business? We don't just fix houses, honey. We own the company that builds them, and the company that supplies the lumber, and the bank that finances the loans. Her eyes went wide. What? And Uncle Ben, I continued, he doesn't just fix cars, he manages the family estate. Grandpa left us everything, Sarah, everything, but he made us promise to live humble, to find people who loved us for us, not for the money. I paused, letting it sink in. We have more money than the Vanderbilts could dream of. We own their mortgage. We own the land their country club sits on. We own the firm that manages their investments. Sarah stared at me, her mouth hanging open. You're joking. I wish I was, I said. I wanted you to have a normal life, I wanted you to be happy. But Martha, she broke the rules. She made this about blood. She made this about class. I turned onto the highway, the rain finally letting up. The clouds were breaking, revealing a cold, grey sky. She thinks we're dirt, I said, pressing the accelerator. So let's show her what happens when you mess with the earth, it buries you. I drove fast. We headed north, away from the city, towards the old family farm, the place we kept secret. As we pulled up the long driveway, Sarah gasped. The farmhouse wasn't just a house, it was a fortress. It was an old stone manor hidden behind miles of forest. And standing on the porch, flanked by 3 men in suits, was my brother Ben. He wasn't wearing his grease-stained coveralls today. He was wearing a black suit, crisp and tailored. He looked like a general preparing for war. I helped Sarah out of the truck. She was limping, but she looked around in awe. Ben walked down the steps, his face hard as stone. He hugged Sarah gently, kissing her forehead. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, he said. His voice was deep, rumbling. Are you okay? I think so, she stuttered. Ben turned to me. The look in his eyes was terrifying. It was the same look Grandpa used to get right before he closed a deal that destroyed a competitor. I made the calls, Ben said. We have everything. The mortgage, I asked. Bought it this morning, Ben said. Called in the favor from the bank CEO. We own the note on their house. It's in default as of right now. And Mark's job. I called the board of directors, Ben said, checking his watch. He was escorted out of the building 10 minutes ago. And the lawyer, I asked. Ben smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The Bar Association is very interested in a lawyer who participates in kidnapping and coercion. He's being disbarred as we speak. I nodded. It was a good start, but it wasn't enough. What about Martha? I asked. Ben reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to me. This is the best part, he said. Grandpa's private investigator files from way back. Turns out the Vanderbilts aren't exactly old money like they claim. And Martha, she has a few skeletons in her closet that would send her to prison for a very long time. I took the envelope. It felt heavy. What do we do? Sarah asked, looking between us. She looked scared, but there was a spark of something else in her eyes now. Hope, and maybe a little bit of anger. I put a hand on her shoulder. We're going to pay them a visit, I said. Tonight, they're hosting their annual charity gala, aren't they? Sarah nodded. Yes, all their friends will be there. Perfect, I said. Go inside, get cleaned up, I told Sarah. There are clothes in the guest room, nice ones, Mom's old stuff, wear the red dress. The red dress. Yes, I said, the one that looks like blood. She looked at me, understanding dawning on her face. She nodded slowly. Okay, Dad. She walked up the steps, her head held a little higher. I turned back to Ben. You ready? I asked. I've been ready for 20 years, Ben said, cracking his knuckles. Let's go teach these people a lesson in humility. No, I corrected him, opening the truck door. Not humility, justice. We were about to crash the party of the century, and we weren't bringing a gift, we were bringing the truth, and the truth was going to hurt. But I had no idea that when we walked through those doors, Martha would have one final trap waiting for us, something I never saw coming. Something that would almost ruin everything. I stood at the bottom of the grand staircase in the farmhouse, my heart still racing from the adrenaline of the drive. Ben was packing in the foyer, checking his phone, barking orders to his team of lawyers. The papers are filed, Ben said, looking up. The foreclosure notice is being served to Richard right now, but the sheriff won't enforce it until morning. That means we have tonight. Tonight is enough, I said. Then I heard a door creak open upstairs. I looked up and my breath caught in my throat. Sarah was standing at the top of the stairs. She had washed the mud from her hair, she had scrubbed the dirt from her skin, and she was wearing the red dress. It was a deep crimson red, the colour of roses, the colour of power, the colour of blood. She didn't look like the shivering, broken girl I had pulled out of the ravine 2 hours ago. Her chin was up, her eyes were dry, there was a fire in them that I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. She gripped the railing and walked down one step at a time. Click, click, click. How do I look? She asked, her voice steady. Like a Vanderbilt's worst nightmare, Ben grinned, straightening his tie. Good, she said, because I'm done being their victim. Are you sure you can do this? I asked, searching her face. You're pregnant, Sarah. You've been through hell today. We can do this without you. Ben and I can handle it. She shook her head. No, Dad. She looked me in the eye when she left me there. I need her to look me in the eye when she loses everything. I nodded. I understood that need. All right then, I said. Let's go to the garage. We walked out the back door to the detached barn. Sarah had never been in here. She thought it was filled with old tools and lumber. I slid the heavy barn door open. The overhead lights flickered on, revealing the gleaming chrome and polished paint of Ben's collection. He didn't just fix cars, he collected the rarest ones in the world. Take your pick, Ben said, gesturing to the row of vehicles. There was a vintage Ferrari, a sleek black Aston Martin, but my eyes landed on the one in the center. The Rolls-Royce Phantom, majestic, black and terrifyingly expensive, it was a tank in a tuxedo. That one, I said. I'll drive, Ben said, tossing me the keys to the passenger side. You sit in the back with Sarah, look like the royalty you are. We climbed in, the leather smelled like money, the engine purred so quietly you could barely hear it. As we rolled down the long driveway, leaving the safety of the farm behind, I took Sarah's hand. Her palm was cold, but her grip was iron. Just remember, I whispered, when we walk in there we don't say a word at first, we let them wonder. Silence is louder than shouting. I know, Dad, she said. Grandpa taught me that too. We hit the highway. Ben drove aggressively, weaving through traffic like he owned the road. In a way, he did. 30 minutes later, we saw the lights of the Vanderbilt estate. It was lit up like a palace. Spotlights swept the sky. A line of limousines snaked out the front gate. Valets were running back and forth. This was the gala for the unfortunate, Martha's pet project. A party where rich people drank $1,000 champagne to celebrate how generous they were to the poor. The irony made my stomach turn. We pulled up to the gate. The same security guard from years ago was there. Or maybe it was a new one. They all looked the same, smug, bored, judgmental. He stepped out, holding up a hand to stop us. He didn't recognize the car immediately. He just saw a vehicle that wasn't on his list. The window rolled down. Invitation, he barked, not even looking inside yet. Ben leaned across the seat. He didn't shout, he didn't get angry, he just lowered his sunglasses. Open the gate, Ben said. The guard scoffed. Sir, this is a private event if you're not on the list. I don't need to be on the list, Ben said calmly. I own the list, I own the gate. And as of this morning, I own the mortgage on this property. Now open the gate, or I'll have your employment terminated before the gate hits the stopper. The guard froze. He looked at Ben, he looked at the car, he looked at the license plate. Something in Ben's voice, that absolute terrifying confidence, shook him. The guard swallowed hard. He stepped back and pressed the button. The iron gates swung open. Thank you, Ben said, rolling the window up. We glided up the driveway, bypassing the line of limos. Ben pulled right up to the red carpet, blocking the entrance. A valet rushed over, looking flustered. Sir, you can't park here, this is for drop-off only. Ben ignored him. He got out, walked around, and opened the back door. I stepped out first. I was wearing my best suit, a dark charcoal Italian cut that Ben had bought me for funerals and hostile takeovers. I buttoned the jacket. Then I turned and offered my hand to Sarah. She stepped out. The red dress caught the light of the paparazzi flashes. For a second there was confusion. The cameras flashed, but the photographers were whispering, "Who is that? Is that a movie star?" Then someone recognized her. "Wait, isn't that the daughter-in-law, the poor one?" "It is, Sarah, but look at her." She stood tall, her baby bump proud under the red silk. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight at the front doors. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready," she said. We walked up the steps. The doors swung open. The noise of the party hit us first. Laughter, clinking glasses, a string quartet playing Mozart. We stepped into the ballroom. It was packed, 300 of the city's elite, men in tuxedos, women in diamonds. And then it happened. The ripple effect. The people near the door saw us and went silent. They nudged their neighbors. "Look." The silence spread like a wave across the room. The laughter died. The conversation stopped. Even the string quartet trailed off, the cellist looking confused as he lowered his bow. In 10 seconds, the entire room was dead silent. All eyes were on us. And standing in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne, was Martha. She was wearing a silver gown that cost more than my house. She looked like an ice queen holding court. She was laughing at something a senator was saying. Then she noticed the silence. She turned around. Her eyes landed on Sarah. For a split second I saw it, pure unadulterated shock. Her face went pale, her glass tilted, spilling a little champagne on the floor. She thought Sarah was dead, or frozen in the woods, or lost. She didn't expect her to be here, and she certainly didn't expect her to look like this. But Martha was a professional predator. She recovered instantly. The shock vanished, replaced by a sneer of cold fury. She handed her glass to a waiter and marched toward us, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. Mark was trailing behind her, looking pale and terrified. He saw Sarah and stopped dead, his mouth hanging open. Martha stopped 5 feet from us. She looked Sarah up and down, then turned her glare to me. "What on earth are you doing here?" she hissed, low enough so the room couldn't hear the venom but loud enough for us. "I thought I made it clear where you belong." "We're here for the party, Martha," I said, my voice projecting clearly in the silent room. It's a charity gala, isn't it? For the unfortunate. We thought we'd come see how the other half gives. Get out, she snapped. You are trespassing, you are embarrassing my son, look at you. Dragging your pregnant daughter out in a cheap dress to try and beg for scraps, it's pathetic. She turned to the crowd, putting on a fake pitying smile. Everyone, I apologize, she announced, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. This is my daughter-in-law's family. They're a bit confused. Mental illness runs in the family, I'm afraid. Security is escorting them out. A few people chuckled nervously. Sarah stepped forward. No one is escorting us anywhere, Martha, Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear as a bell. Martha laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. Oh, honey, you think you have a voice here. You're a nobody. You're a gold digger who trapped my son, and now you're making a scene because you didn't get your way. Go back to the trailer park. Actually, Ben spoke up, stepping out from behind me. Martha looked at Ben. She frowned. She didn't recognize him in the suit. She only knew him as the guy who fixed her Mercedes once. Who are you? She demanded. The driver. I'm Ben Miller, he said, and I'm not the driver, I'm the landlord. Excuse me. You heard me, Ben said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a folded document. As of 4:00 p.m. today, Miller Holdings acquired the note on this property from the bank. You've missed 3 payments, Martha. You're over-leveraged, you're broke. The crowd gasped. A murmur rippled through the room. Broke the Vanderbilts. Miller Holdings, isn't that the investment firm from the city? Martha's face turned purple. Lies, security, get these lunatics out of here. 2 large security guards started moving toward us. I wouldn't do that, I said, stepping in front of Sarah, unless you want to be arrested for assaulting the property owners. The guards hesitated. They looked at Martha, they looked at Ben's suit, they looked at the confidence radiating off us. They stopped. This is ridiculous, Martha screeched. Mark, tell them to leave. Mark stepped forward. He looked at Sarah, he looked at his mother. He was sweating. Sarah, he stammered, just go, please, you're making a mess. Sarah looked at her husband, the father of her child. A mess, she asked softly. Mark, your mother kidnapped me. She drove me to the woods. She left me to die in the freezing rain because she said our baby's blood was dirty. The gasp from the crowd was louder this time. Shocked whispers broke out. Kidnapped her. Left in the woods. Martha's eyes darted around the room. She was losing control. She was losing the narrative. She needed to destroy us, and fast. And that's when she sprang her trap. The one thing I hadn't anticipated. She didn't deny it, she didn't scream. Instead, her face crumpled. She let out a sob, a fake, theatrical sob. She covered her face with her hands, shaking. Oh God, she wept. I tried to protect you, Sarah. I tried to keep this private. She looked up at the crowd, tears streaming down her face. She was an incredible actress. She's lying, Martha cried out, pointing a trembling finger at Sarah. She's having an episode. My poor daughter-in-law, she's been addicted to painkillers for months. We tried to get her help. We tried an intervention yesterday. I froze, addicted. She ran away, Martha sobbed, grabbing Mark's arm. She ran into the woods in a drug-induced hysteria. We've been looking for her all day. I didn't kidnap her. I've been trying to save her from herself. She turned to Mark. Tell them, Mark, tell them about the pills. Tell them how she hurt herself. My heart stopped. I looked at Mark. This was the moment, the pivot point. If Mark told the truth, it was over. If he lied, if he backed up his mother's story, it was her word against ours. The rich, respected matriarch versus the crazy girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Mark looked at Sarah. Sarah was staring at him, pleading silently, please be the man I married. Mark looked down at his shoes. He took a shaky breath. It's true, Mark whispered. What? Sarah breathed. Mark looked up, tears in his eyes, but his jaw was set. He had chosen his side. He had chosen the money. He had chosen the lie. She's been using, Mark said, his voice getting louder, gaining fake confidence. She's unstable. She ran off into the woods. Mom tried to stop her. Sarah, you need help. You're dangerous to the baby. The crowd shifted. I could feel it. The sympathy was swinging back to Martha. They were nodding. Ah, that makes sense. Drugs, how tragic. Martha wiped her eyes. a triumphant smirk hiding behind her handkerchief. "Officer," she called out to the policeman standing near the punch bowl, "please, take her into custody for her own safety. She's a danger to herself and my grandchild." The officer started walking toward us, unclipping his handcuffs. I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. This was the trap. She was going to have Sarah committed. She was going to take the baby by declaring Sarah an unfit, drug-addicted mother, and she had Mark's testimony to prove it. Sarah grabbed my arm, terrified. "Dad, I did, you know I did." "I know," I said. The officer was 10 feet away. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." "Wait," I said. The officer didn't stop. "Step aside, sir." I said wait, I roared. My voice echoed off the high ceilings. It was the voice I used when a wall was about to collapse, the voice of absolute authority. The officer paused. "You want proof?" I asked, looking at Martha. "You want to talk about stability? You want to talk about who exactly is dangerous?" "We've heard enough from you," Martha spat. "Get them out." I reached into my pocket, but not for a weapon. I pulled out my phones. "Ben," I said, "connect to the audio system." Ben was already at the DJ booth. The DJ, a skinny kid who looked terrified of Ben, had stepped aside. Ben plugged a cord into the soundboard. "What are you doing?" Martha demanded. "Stop this." "You said Sarah was on drugs," I said, my voice calm now. "You said she ran away. You said you were at the house." I tapped the screen on my phone. "Let's hear what you were really doing at 11:00 a.m. today." A screech of feedback cut through the room, making everyone cover their ears. Then a voice boomed through the massive Gala speakers, crystal clear. It was a recording. "Walk home, you trash. Maybe the cold will clean that dirty blood of yours." The room went deathly silent. Martha's face went white. The recording continued, the sound of rain, the sound of a car door slamming. "If you make it back, you'll sign the papers. If you don't, well, problem solved. Mark doesn't need a peasant raising his heir." I hit pause. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Martha. She wasn't smirking anymore. She looked like she was about to vomit. "That," I said to the crowd, "was recorded on Sarah's phone. It uploaded to the cloud the second she got a signal, along with the GPS data showing exactly where you dropped her. 5 miles past the county line." I turned to the officer, who was now looking at Martha with a very different expression. "Officer," I said, "that sounds like kidnapping to me, attempted murder actually." Martha was shaking. "It's fake, it's AI, they doctored it." "And the text messages?" Ben asked, speaking into the microphone from the DJ booth. "Are those fake too?" Ben hit a button. The giant projector screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the charity logo, suddenly changed. It was a screenshot of a text thread, from Martha to Mark. Timestamp, 11:45 a.m. today. "Martha, it's done, she's in the woods. She won't last the night, prepare the grieving husband act." "Mark, okay Mom, are you sure no one saw?" The crowd erupted. It was chaos. People were gasping, shouting, pulling out their phones to record. Mark looked like he had been shot. He backed away, shaking his head. No, I did." Sarah looked at the screen. She read the text from her husband, "Prepare the grieving husband act." She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just stared at him, and the last tiny bit of love she held for him died right there on the ballroom floor. Martha lunged at me. "You ruined everything, you dirty, low-class nobody." She raised her hand to slap me. I caught her wrist, mid-air. I didn't squeeze, I didn't twist, I just held it there. "We're not nobodies, Martha," I said, leaning in close so only she could hear. "And we're not poor, we're the Millers. My grandfather built this town, my brother owns your mortgage, and I let go of her wrist with a shove. "I'm the father you shouldn't have messed with." The officer stepped forward. "Martha Vanderbilt, Mark Vanderbilt, put your hands behind your backs." "No," Martha screamed as the officer grabbed her arm. "Do you know who I am? I am a Vanderbilt." "And you have the right to remain silent," the officer said, snapping the cuffs on. The crowd watched in stunned fascination as the queen of high society was dragged away in her silver gown, kicking and screaming. Mark followed, head hung low, weeping like a child. As they reached the door, Mark stopped. He looked back at Sarah. "Sarah," he cried out, "I'm sorry, she made me do it. I love you, please tell them." Sarah stood there in her red dress. She looked like a statue of a goddess. She looked at him. "My blood might be dirty to you, Mark," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "but at least it's real. Yours is just ink on a checkbook." She turned her back on him. The doors closed. They were gone. The room was still silent, hundreds of people staring at us. Ben walked down from the DJ booth. He stood next to me. "Well," Ben said, adjusting his cufflinks, "I think that concludes the entertainment portion of the evening." I looked at Sarah. She was trembling now. The adrenaline was fading and the reality was setting in. "Let's go home," I said gently. "Yeah," she whispered, "home." We turned to leave. The crowd parted for us again, but this time it wasn't out of judgment, it was out of fear and respect. We walked out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped completely. The stars were out. We got back into the Rolls-Royce. I thought it was over. I thought we had won. But as we drove away, Sarah grabbed her stomach. She gasped, doubling over in pain. "Dad," she cried out. What is it?" I panicked, turning to her. Her face was twisted in agony. She gripped my hand so hard her nails dug into my skin. "The baby," she screamed. "Something's wrong, it hurts, oh God, it hurts." I looked down. The red dress was getting darker. "Wet." "Ben," I shouted, "hospital now." Ben didn't ask questions. He slammed on the gas. The massive car roared, tires screeching as we drifted onto the main road. "Hang on, Sarah," I yelled, holding her tight. "Just hang on." "I can't lose him, Dad," she sobbed, her voice weak. "Please don't let her win, don't let her take my baby." "She won't," I promised, though I was terrified. "Drive, Ben, drive." We were racing against time now. The revenge was sweet, but the cost might be everything. The lights of the emergency room entrance were a blurring smear of white and blue as Ben drifted the heavy Rolls-Royce to a stop. I didn't wait for the car to fully settle. I jumped out, scooped Sarah into my arms, and ran toward the sliding glass doors. "Help, I need a doctor, my daughter," I roared. Nurses came from everywhere. A gurney was pushed into my path and I laid her down gently. She was pale, her breathing shallow, her hand still locked onto mine like a vice. "Don't let go, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Please don't let go." "I'm right here, Sarah, I'm right here." They wheeled her through the double doors, and for the first time in my life I was stopped. A nurse put a firm hand on my chest. "Sir, you have to stay here, we have to stabilize her." "That's my daughter, that's my grandchild." "I know," she said, her eyes kind but firm, "but let the doctors do their job, please." The doors swung shut and I was left standing in the sterile, silent hallway. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with a mixture of rain, mud, and blood. My expensive suit was ruined. I didn't care. Ben walked up behind me, his heavy hand landing on my shoulder. He looked just as shaken as I felt. "She's a fighter, David," Ben said. "She's a Miller, she's gonna make it." I couldn't speak. I just leaned against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor. I buried my face in my hands. For the next 4 hours the world didn't exist. People walked by, machines beeped, and the smell of antiseptic filled my lungs, but I was back in those woods. I was back in that ballroom. I kept playing the look on Martha's face over and over. I had wanted her to suffer, but not like this, not at the cost of Sarah's life. "Mr. Miller." I bolted upright. A doctor in green scrubs was standing there, pulling his mask down. He looked exhausted. "How is she?" I asked, my heart stopping. The doctor smiled, a small, genuine smile. "She's a very lucky young woman. The stress and the exposure caused some complications and she went into early labor, but we managed to stop it. The baby is safe and so is Sarah." I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I found her in the ravine. I sank back against the wall, tears finally stinging my eyes. "Can I see her?" "She's resting, but yes, room 412. I practically ran. When I walked in, the room was quiet. Sarah was propped up on the pillows, looking exhausted but peaceful. The color was back in her face. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Hey, Grandpa," she whispered. I walked over and kissed her forehead. You scared the life out of me, kiddo. I'm okay, she said, reaching for my hand. We're okay, he's okay. She patted her stomach. We sat in silence for a while, the morning sun finally starting to peek through the hospital blinds. It was a new day, a completely different world from the one we had woken up in yesterday. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now, I said, we finish it. Over the next few weeks, the fall of the Vanderbilts was the talk of the entire country. The recording and the texts had gone viral. Every news outlet was covering the Vanderbilt kidnapping. Martha and Mark's high-priced lawyers tried everything. They tried to claim the recording was illegal. They tried to claim Sarah was mentally unstable, but they didn't have the power they once had. Ben made sure of that. He moved through the financial world like a silent assassin. Every favor the Vanderbilts had, every connection they relied on, Ben cut it. He bought the law firm they used. He bought the bank that held their personal accounts. By the time the trial started, Martha wasn't the queen of the city. She was a woman in an orange jumpsuit who couldn't even afford her own defense. I remember the day of the sentencing. Sarah was there, sitting in the front row, looking radiant in a simple blue dress. She was 8 months pregnant now, glowing with health. Martha was brought in. She looked like she had aged 20 years. Her hair was grey, her skin sallow. She looked at Sarah, and for the first time there was no sneer. There was only fear. The judge didn't hold back. Your actions were not only criminal, they were monstrous, the judge said, looking down at Martha. To leave a pregnant woman in the elements to protect a family legacy built on a lie, it's unthinkable. Martha was sentenced to 15 years. Mark, for his cooperation in the cover-up and his false testimony, got 5. As they were led away, Mark tried to catch Sarah's eye. He mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Sarah didn't even blink. She just turned to me and smiled. "Are you ready to go?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. "I have a nursery to finish." 6 months later, the sun was shining over the Miller family farm. The old farmhouse had been renovated. It wasn't a fortress anymore, it was a home. The porches were wide, the garden was full of flowers, and the sound of laughter echoed through the trees. I was sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Ben was at the grill, arguing with one of the guys about the best way to sear a steak. Life was loud, life was good. The front door opened and Sarah walked out. She looked happy, truly deeply happy. In her arms, she was carrying a bundle of blankets. "Someone's awake," she said, handing him to me. I looked down at my grandson, little Leo. He had my eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. He reached up and grabbed my thumb with his tiny hand. "Hey there, little man," I whispered. Leo let out a little gurgle and a gummy smile. "You know what, Dad?" Sarah said, sitting down next to me and resting her head on my shoulder. "What's that, honey?" I used to be so afraid of what they thought of us. I used to think that because we didn't have a name like theirs, we didn't matter. I squeezed her shoulder, and now. She looked at her son, then at me, then at the beautiful land that had been in our family for generations. "Now I know that blood isn't about the name you carry or the money you have," she said. "It's about the people who won't leave you behind. It's about the people who find you in the rain." I looked out over the fields. The Vanderbilts were gone, their mansion sold and turned into a public park. The lies were over, the secrets were gone. We were just the Millers, and that was more than enough. I leaned back, the swing creaking gently as the first stars began to twinkle in the big American sky. I looked at my daughter, I looked at my grandson, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in a lifetime. We had been through the storm, and we had come out stronger on the other side. And they lived happily ever after with a big smile.